Hello and welcome to the Football Digest Extra. I'm Kaynak, Arsenal reporter for Football.London, and I'm joined by the Daily Mirror's chief football correspondent, John Cross. We're here to talk about yesterday's North London derby. It was an event-packed match, a very interesting game, but I think the major talking point and where we have to start, Crossy, is the penalty. That was the decision that decided the game. Did you think it was a penalty?
Oh, it's really interesting, Kai, because I've got to be honest, at the time, when I first saw it, you think, blimey, it's sitting there in real time in the stadium, by the way, sort of kind of, you've got this sort of great view, sort of diagonal on. I'm thinking, oh, he's wiped him out. But then you could see the first replay. In the first replay, I'm thinking, no, he's missed the ball. He's taken an air shot at it. And then basically sort of Sanchez has then wiped him out. The ball's gone. And then it's only afterwards, really, that you kind of suddenly think, well, actually, even if he's taking him out in the same motion, and sort of, did check in with the sort of kind of, the referee sort of side of it, Premier League wise, and you begin to realise, well, actually, a foul is still a foul, even if it's slightly after the event, if you like. So I did, in sort of kind of all things considered, did think it was a penalty. Yes, it was interesting. Really, it's divided people right down the middle, and I think almost to sort of highlight and sort of underline that kind of split decision on it, because I don't think it's sort of black and white. Is that basically I got the impression that in it, Michael Oliver clearly thought it was a penalty, the referee, and then Paul Tierney looks at it from a VAR perspective, clearly thought, well, not too sure, but we go back to that thing. Is it a clear and obvious error? Well, the feeling was that basically, no, it wasn't obvious enough to kind of overturn it, if you like. I did see what Jose Mourinho said afterwards, saying that the fourth official said that, that encouraged the referee to check it. I'm not sure I quite believe that. Sometimes these things are said in anger and haste. And, I do think it was checked by the VAR. There's no way around that. And clearly the VAR didn't think there was enough to turn it around. I can see it from both sides. I can actually see that there's an argument that basically that it shouldn't have been given. My feeling is that actually the penalty was right to stand, because you can't go flying through people and then not expect. Otherwise, what happens at corner situations when the ball kind of comes in, and either before or after you pin someone down so they can't play the ball? Well, it's the same, isn't it? So I do actually think in the big shake-up, really, in the big fallout, I think overall, I think it was a penalty.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because anywhere else on the pitch, if you're late in a tackle, then it is a foul. But when it comes to taking shots, or when it comes to inside the penalty box, there seems to be an unwritten rule that if you get your shot away, then anything that happens afterwards is sort of collateral. But I've never really understood that. I've always thought that, obviously, Arsenal perspective on it is slightly different from the Spurs perspective. And I think Mourinho, after the game, he said he refused to call it a penalty because it was a disgrace to penalties or something like that. Another classic Mourinho line from a press conference. But I think it's a strange one, because we saw Eric Lamela got his first yellow card. We'll come on to his performance because it's an interesting one later. But his first yellow card was for a late tackle, which was more or less similar to what Sanchez did on Lacazette. Yes, Lacazette does miss the ball, but he makes contact, and then Sanchez comes in, and that can endanger an opponent. That's what the foul was for. And I think on balance, it probably was just about a penalty, despite the very strong protestations to the contrary from all the other people. But Mourinho was definitely unhappy with that. Another thing he was unhappy with was his side's first half performance, where he said they really lacked intensity in the game. And I don't know, Cross, you were there at the game. Do you feel like they upped their intensity in the second half? And what do you make of Mourinho's tactics in a big game, in a derby match, with Arsenal's defence playing the way it has been in recent games? Spurs didn't really come at them like we expected them to. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I was really surprised, Kai, in that basically I did feel, Spurs finished the game so well, didn't they? With despite being down to 10 men, in the last 20 minutes, it was kind of a bit of a siege, really. And so they pinned Arsenal back. And listen, first and foremost, I was a bit surprised that Mourinho went with his much talked about, much vaunted front three, and then obviously Lucas Moura in the 10. And then I wasn't quite sure, whether Mourinho would risk that in such a big game away from home. It's not very Mourinho-esque. So, credit to him. But I agree with him that basically Bale was so poor in the game. I mean, he was really, there's been so much discussion about Bale, and I'm a huge Bale fan. But he's offered no protection to Matt Doherty at all. Whatever you think about Matt Doherty and this season, it's been a difficult season for him. I don't think he's settled particularly well at Spurs. I just think he was horribly exposed. Arsenal's best, joy was down their left-hand side, Spurs right. And they absolutely, killed them down that flank. Smith Rowe and Tierney, that link-up was key to the game, in my view, right throughout the whole 90 minutes. And I was just so surprised then that Spurs kind of, weren't at the races. When they score, it was out of context of the rest of the game, if you like, against the run of play, I should say. And I just thought that, until that point, Arsenal were much, much better and didn't deserve to be behind. And Spurs really surprised me because I felt that the results on Saturday meant that there was a lot at stake for them. And that basically, a big win would have really strengthened this belief that they could yet make a late push for the top four. It's looking tough now. And I just think I was really surprised about their lack of intensity. And, it was felt a bit typical of Mourinho afterwards, didn't it? To kind of saying some of the big players go hiding. But it did really. And, I was very, very surprised and disappointed in Spurs, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you've sort of picked up on Mourinho's reaction afterwards, which is what I was wanting to ask you about next. Is sort of, we've seen the classic Mourinho playbook, which is deflect attention away from himself and away from his tactics, put the focus on the players, put the focus on the referees. But we've seen this defensive approach from Mourinho in game after game after game. We saw it in that game against Chelsea when it was one of the most boring 0-0s you're likely to see ever, when Tuchel sort of matched up with him and they went 0-0. It's something that we see consistently from Mourinho in big games, maybe except for that 6-1 against Manchester United earlier in the season, but there were other circumstances around that. Do you think Spurs are obviously a side with lofty ambitions? They want to be getting into the top four. They're in the Champions League final not that long ago, and they definitely want to get back to that. They've moved into the new stadium. They've got big ambitions going forward. Do you think Mourinho is the right man with those kind of defensive tactics in big games to be able to take them there?
I'm so torn on it. I do think he's at heart a pragmatist, and I think it's rather like this season. Spurs don't quite know where they're going with it, really, because they have some big setbacks like yesterday when Arsenal were dominant. I think thoroughly deserved the win, and yet actually, if you look at the overall picture, I think at times Spurs have played some decent stuff, particularly with in recent times when they've sort of kind of used the front three with a kind of a 10 as well. That's a very attacking formation. That's what Spurs fans want, and you can't say they. You can't say it's too formulaic, Spurs. I do think they sort of allowed themselves to express themselves really as a team. And actually they're still in a cup final, Wembley Cup final, the Carabao Cup. And ultimately, if they're trying to sort of kind of say we're a big team, we want to be winning trophies, that's the first step there. I just still think that Spurs fans, though, if you look at sort of kind of social media and he's kind of, I live in North London. I've got a lot of Spurs fans who are sort of, mates and quite a few, about 3 or 4 season ticket holders, and have been for years. And they're still struggling with the whole concept. They don't like, Mourinho. They don't like the style of play. And sometimes I sort of say, but you're winning games, and that performance was okay, wasn't it? And they're still not having it. They're just not having it. And it's always been an obstacle there because associations with other clubs, whether it be Chelsea or kind of style of football. And, I just wonder what Mourinho needs to kind of, sort of convince the fans. I think it's the trophy. And then basically if they win the Carabao Cup, get into Europe, then I still think it's been a decent season for Spurs. And I think you've got to play the long game because Spurs, like a few clubs, including Arsenal, are really struggling, I think, sort of kind of financially. It's difficult times because of the pandemic. And they've got their own particular set of circumstances, i.e. the new stadium. So it's a really difficult, challenging period. But, I still think we'll make the decision on Mourinho based on whether he wins a trophy or not.
And we could talk about Mourinho for more or less the rest of the show, couldn't we? But we'll get
I
plenty of
do
questions
quite like
coming
him,
in.
I still think he's quite good value. He's sort of kind of decent in press conferences and kind of, delivers. And, I know sort of kind of fans get frustrated because there's a so-called media loving about Mourinho. Well, there is, because he delivers headlines. And so he's still always good value. And you can't, sometimes he's just cheeky for the sake of it. And I do think he's still quite good value on that front.
Certainly makes our job a lot easier. But speaking of cheeky things, let's talk about Eric Lamela's goal yesterday. You said it's the goal of the season. I wasn't lucky enough to be at the game. You were there. Is that the best goal you've ever seen live, do you think?
Oh, I don't know about that actually. Oh gosh.
While you think about that, I'll tell you what the one that I've got in my head, which is Giroud's scorpion kick against Crystal Palace a few years ago. That for me is the best goal I've ever seen live. I think Lamela's one in terms of audacity and individual skill comes close to it, but for me that Giroud one still is ranking just about above it.
Yeah, it's a great shout. I've been lucky enough to kind of see some amazing goals, and immediately that sort of kind of comes to mind. There's been a few spectacular Henry ones that I've seen live in the flesh, definitely. Ibrahimovic against England will always, there and there for that, and so that will live long in the memory. The Jack Wilshere goal, the kind of the intricate passing one, that kind of, blimey, it was astonishing, really. It's a great shout. It's definitely in my top five. Well, top three, I would say. And what made it so special was that where I was sat in the press box. And we're so lucky at the moment, aren't we? Sort of kind of those as a game, and and you're fortunate to have gone to some games yourself, and it's you feel quite privileged in the stadium at the moment. Maybe that sort of kind of brings it home a little bit more. But from where I was sat to the kind of the left edge of the sort of the dugouts, behind the dugouts, I had this most incredible diagonal view, in that basically I could see Lamela wrapping his left leg around his standing right leg, and then just play the ball, and then just almost exactly like in line diagonally with where the path of the ball was going into the far corner. And that's what for me made it even more special. I don't know whether I was deceiving myself with angles there and that basically everyone could see the same thing, but it just felt this incredible precise angle. And it was, I just thought, wow, that is amazing. And I just love, skillful players. And Lamela is that skillful player. He's a bit of an enigma, isn't he? I mean, immediately people kind of throw up, oh, he's done it before. And kind of, this isn't even his best Rabona because he did it in 2014 in the Europa League. Well, I'm sorry. I don't buy that for a second. Why was this better than that one, which I do remember. I think I was at that game. Well, it's obvious. It's because basically it's a big game, and to try that big piece of audacity and the sort of audacious skill in the North London derby is off the scale. It's fantastic, and that's what gripped me. And I thought that was a fantastic piece of skill and could have at that point changed the game from a Spurs perspective. I guess you're looking at it and you're thinking, wow, you must, you kind of got to grasp the metal with that and use that as kind of the springboard to go and win the game. And that, on the basis of play, when Arsenal had been so dominant up to that point, that would have been unfair. But that piece of skill, was the open invitation to do it. So it was an amazing effort. I love the skill. I love the audacity and the notion also that the lengths that Lamela will go to stop himself from having to use his right foot. He's one of the most one-footed players you're ever likely to see, isn't it? It's incredible. Arsenal have had a few down the years, but he's right up there.
Yeah, I think Nicolas Pepe might give him a rival one-footed as well in the current Arsenal squad. But let's talk about the rest of Lamela's display, which was slightly less spectacular. He seemed to be, from the minute he came on, he seemed to be sort of very charged in his attempts to try and wind up the Arsenal team. And he ended up taking that a bit too far, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And I think you could make a case for both yellow cards. And I felt that the first one was definitely a yellow. I'll be honest, the second one, I wasn't quite so sure about, really. It's one of those where I felt that because he and Spurs had been a bit had been naughty and a bit aggressive, basically, in a typical feisty game. I think that basically there's an element there of sort of kind of totting up that made Oliver go, do you know what? I'm gonna book you for that as well, and basically off you go.
Yeah.
I just felt as if there were worse offenders in the game. I mean, at the time, I have to say, I kind of looked at the Kane one on Gabriel, where, and I know this has caused a lot of debate and say, well, why hasn't this been highlighted? I saw it at the time. I thought, wow, that's a bad one. And, on the TV replay, because I just hadn't, saw it, saw what happened live, but you don't see the full extent of it in the stadium, sort of kind of sitting in your seat, and you see the replay on the sort of kind of monitor there. And I was thinking, well, I wonder if he'll get done and they'll bring it back, but he clearly didn't. And, you see it from a different angle, and maybe you think, it's not as bad as that. But one angle is particularly damning. And I just thought, in the grand scheme of things, I wonder whether that kind of played into Michael Oliver's mind and said, right, I'm going to try and stamp my authority back on it. And that's why I don't think that Lamela can have too much of a complaint, overall. I think that a Spurs player was I think, inevitably going to get sent off, just because, it was getting out of hand. It was getting a bit niggly. And, Lamela was distraught clearly afterwards. Well, I've got a certain sympathy, but I don't really think you can have too much complaints, really. I don't know what you think, but did you think?
I thought he was the amount of fouls he ended up making in the build up to that first yellow card. I know that afterwards I saw a Match of the Day, Jermaine Genius was saying that he got the ball, so it wasn't a yellow card, but I think it wasn't so much for the individual foul, was it? It was for the, like you were saying, just the totting up of niggly little fouls that Lamela kept making. And after he got that yellow card, he didn't sort of heed his warning and hang back a bit, which is what players who are good at that sort of thing, which Lamela is normally, to be fair to him, he knows the line to tread. It's a very fine line, but we've seen Højbjerg also does it, and he managed to sort of reel himself back in after he got a booking, but he went around making a few fouls on the day. I think they targeted Bukayo Saka quite a lot in the first half, didn't they? Which sadly he came off injured, and hopefully, we'll hear an update on that soon. Hopefully that's not too serious. We think that's more of a hamstring problem actually, but yeah, it was. I thought it probably was, in the grand scheme of things, a red. I think just accumulation of fouls. Like, you can't. Maybe Lamela was distraught after it, and it's a shame that on the day he scored such a great goal that the game had to end in that way for him. But you have to know where the line is, and I think he lost it a bit. And Mourinho was talking before the game actually about how no fans in the stadium means there's probably a little bit less passion, a little bit less edge going into the derby. There was no signs of that on the day. I think both Arsenal and Spurs were pretty adamant that they were going to be up for a fight, and we saw that actually with not just Spurs players. In fairness, Arsenal players were happy to give a bit back, and Granit Xhaka, David Luiz, they were giving a bit back to the Spurs bench. What do you think that makes? What do you think that says about the Arsenal character? Because we've seen in recent years Arsenal teams have come up against Mourinho sides, and they've really started to struggle when it comes to sort of dealing with that physical side of the game. But yesterday, they really stood up to be counted. And do you think that's an effect that Arteta's having on the side?
Yeah, I do. Listen, first and foremost, I'm quite a big Arteta fan. I do think that basically, I do think he's. Listen, I think it's just strange territory where Arsenal are in mid-table. I just don't. It doesn't sit easy, And basically, I like the fact that Arsenal fans have bought into this project. I'm not sure that other managers have been afforded so much time, but so much the better, really, because the last thing Arsenal need to be doing is changing the manager again. But it's just, it's going to be, I think, a painful time, because I can't see Arsenal getting back into Europe, and I think that's basically going to cause, a knock-on effect, about keeping players, about signing new players, about reshaping, rebuilding the squad. I do think generally he's moving absolutely in the right direction. It's just going to take time and patience. And the one aspect of him, I like his kind of, his emotion and his determination on the sidelines. And I think that feeds into the players, and I think the players sort of kind of take that. And I like, Xhaka is such an interesting player, isn't he? Because he's, there's such two sides to him, because he can be so frustrating with all these mistakes that he's an amazing stat about the sort of kind of mistakes leading to a goal. And yet other times you're thinking, well, he's definitely the best partner for Thomas Partey, who's clearly a brilliant midfielder, and just need to unlock it on a regular basis, fitness wise, I think. And I love that kind of passion. I love Tierney and the attitude that he brings, and also David Luiz to a degree. I think David Luiz is, you can see it vocally on the pitch and sort of off the pitch. He's got a good reputation of being, strong, isn't he? A different sort of voice. So I think I do think it's great that they've got that bit of edge to them. It's great that they've got that character and those leaders. And I love that mentality, because the mentality has been such an issue for Arsenal for so long, in that basically they've been a bit soft. It's been seen as a bit of a soft touch. And any little, sign that they're doing that on a regular and consistent basis got to be a good thing. And I do think there's sort of kind of that mentality is quite a big thing for Arsenal. I do think it'd be naive to suggest it's, flipped overnight. And I think it's a long-term thing. But I do think that basically that comes from signing the right players and the right characters. And again, I kind of think that January was quite big in that, and sort of kind of making sure the squad was a bit more unified and together. And I think that was a big step forward. And I think that, I think this summer as well, if he's able to sign decent players, you want to sign the right players with the right mentality.
For sure. And we talk about mentality and sort of a cultural shift. Another big call that Arteta made before the game was obviously to drop Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. And we know that was due to a disciplinary reason. We were talking about it before, actually, weren't we? Saying that we think it's the right call from Mikel Arteta. Obviously, Aubameyang is the captain, star striker, top goal scorer. But when it comes to discipline, Arteta's had a really big job on his hands, because that was the issue. Obviously, you can look at the tactical side with Unai Emery, but ultimately, I think personally, the thing that ended up forcing him out was the fact that he lost the dressing room. And Arteta has shown that he's no intention of doing that. He's letting them know, look, I'm the boss. That's the way. That's the lay of the land. And yeah, I'm interested to hear what you think about the decision to drop Aubameyang due to disciplinary issues.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's easy to say this when Arsenal have won, isn't it? It looks good, I mean, the fans were going mad on social media beforehand, saying, cutting off your nose to spite your face, thinking that Arsenal would lose as a result. And I guess it makes it easier to swallow the decision, doesn't it, when you win? But I absolutely thought it was the right decision. I really did. I think that, it's clearly a timekeeping issue. And so you can't afford to report up late. He was due to start, absolutely. And then basically, as I wrote this morning, I don't think it was in this morning's paper, I don't think it was the first time he's been late either. So I do think somewhere along the line, you've kind of got to reassert that authority. And if you're doing it just for squad players or just for players who are not that important and don't include your top scorer and captain, who ultimately should be setting an example, I just think you so quickly lose the respect of the other players, particularly when it comes around to having to punish them. And I just think that basically it was absolutely the right thing to do. Even if Arsenal had conceded late on and not won the game, I think it was completely the right choice to do. I think we live in very, very difficult, challenging times. And I think the very least you can do is kind of, observe, the ground rules set and be even more alive to it. And I do think that basically, ultimately, you've got to sort of kind of sit back and say the captain has to set an example. Yeah. And I think Arteta is, very serious on that. He was like that as a player. And I think that, it's unforgivable. I mean, it was a great picture, wasn't it, on social media? I don't know whether you saw it, and basically him stuck in traffic in Muswell Hill. I saw that, which is only a couple of miles away from the Arsenal ground. And someone who used to live in Muswell Hill, that is a very regular occurrence. And frankly, it's always like that, lockdown or not. I mean, I drove from where I live in North London to the game yesterday, and it's like it was so busy, you'd never know it was lockdown. It's so busy, and the fact of the matter is that basically, what do? You leave a bit earlier because it's going to be busy. And I just don't think that people sort of saying, well, I mean, that's why he's got to start. He should go and report it, sort of thing. Sort of that's the reason. Come off it. You got a flight to catch. You get there for a time, you get there on time, don't you? You never miss a flight, I don't think. So why on earth do you think it's sort of acceptable to be a little bit late for, a team meeting? Answer, you don't. You just make sure that you get there on time. It's just unforgivable. So I do think it was absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's that captain's protocol, isn't it? First to show up, last to leave kind of thing. I mean, it's something that, had it gone wrong and had Arsenal lost the game, Mikel Arteta would be getting abuse and all sorts of criticism for it. I agree with you. I think it was the right choice. I think he has to set the standards, and Aubameyang is his captain. And he afterwards spoke glowingly about him. He said, look, he's a good guy, but he's made this mistake and I had to punish him for it. Hopefully we can move on. And obviously Aubameyang's not happy. He didn't look happy on the bench and he was pretty upset, I think, that he wasn't brought on at all during the game. But standards have to be set, and I think Mikel Arteta is very clear about that. But let's move on a little bit and talk about something else in the Arsenal performance, which really caught my eye. And you spoke earlier a little bit about him, actually, was Emile Smith-Rowe, who was absolutely outstanding in the game. For me, was man of the match, took it off after just 77 minutes, but still managed to create more opportunities than the entire Spurs squad put together. So it's just a sign of how incredible he is. And I think we've already spoken actually a little bit earlier before we came on about the England squad being announced on Thursday. And Jack Grealish has been injured recently. I think James Maddison is still injured. Do you think there's a chance he could be called up into Gareth Southgate's senior side?
Well, I guess we'll soon know, because I do think he'll probably be in the under-21s. But it's really interesting, because I wonder if Aubameyang had started yesterday, I wonder whether that might have been at the expense of Smith-Rowe, in that basically, would Aubameyang have started on the left, if you like, Lacazette through the middle, and basically, Lacazette is actually I always think Lacazette is quite reliable in big games.
Yeah.
And then basically he's quite a big game player, as he proved again against Spurs. But you just wonder, and I'm such a massive Smith Rowe fan. The one thing is, I would say, is that basically, you've got to look at it and say, there is a lot of injuries right now, but there's a hell of a lot also of competition in those front areas for England on a senior level. But I just think that Smith Rowe, I think, has been I think he's been so interesting in sort of kind of that number 10 role, and then basically being moved out by sort of Odegaard has been quite a big sort of kind of gamble on Arsenal's point, because I think that, Smith Rowe has been like a breath of fresh air. I think his sort of energy and work rate is better when he's central. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I don't think he's even particularly a wide player, so I just think he's much more influential when he's in the game. And so I think that he's, I do think he's got an England future ahead of him without a shadow of a doubt. But going back to that point, I guess, is that basically, I think maybe he just needs to learn his kind of, or to, get his under-21 wings, if you like, really. Because I think he's been in the under-21s before, hasn't he? And then basically just squad.
Maybe the squad. I don't know if he played. He's definitely played for the under-20s. I'm not sure whether he's made his under-21 debut yet.
Yeah, I think he might have been in a squad, if I remember correctly. And then basically, I do think that one thing that Southgate likes to do is kind of see that in normal traditional cases is kind of go through the age groups and go through the St. George's Park system, if you like. So I do think that basically, I think that he'll just earn his wings. There's no doubt about it in my mind. He's an Arsenal, regular for years to come, and definitely England senior international. But I do think he's up against this incredible array of, English talent. And so if everyone's fit, I don't think he's in. But I think that basically, let's see what happens. But I do think that he's probably under 21s for now.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Phil Foden when I was talking about the number 10 options there. Foden, Maddison, Grealish, others who aren't coming to mind right now. Yeah, like you say, it's pretty tricky.
And by the way, I think England have got to start playing Saka as part of the front three.
Agreed. Well, that's my hope, is that he's not out injured for the international break, because I would have liked to have seen him involved in the front three. I think Shaw and Chilwell are two decent options at left back now, so maybe they don't need to play him there. And if they're going to stick with the back three, then I guess it makes sense to maybe move Saka into one of those attacking positions instead of at wing back, where he's probably a little bit less effective, and you need that pace in the final third and the directness at international level, because that's what scares opposition defenders, and Saka's got it in abundance. And if you look at left-footed wingers that England have, they don't have too many. They've got lots of right-footed players who like to cut in from the left-hand side, but there's not many players who like to play on the right, and Saka's done so well on the right wing in recent times. So maybe that's something. Hopefully he'll be fit for the international break, although I get the suspicion that Arsenal probably won't release him for the internationals if there's even a hint of an injury, just with it coming up so soon. But yeah, let's go to some of your questions now. We've got an interesting one coming in from Mohammed Ismail, who says, Arteta in the last 2 games has done a good job, but any match where he doesn't play Holding, we have a big problem at the back. So obviously Rob Holding has found himself out of the side recently, and David Luiz has come in for him. I personally thought Rob Holding has been one of Arsenal's best defenders this season. I really like the partnership between him and Gabriel, but in recent matches, Arteta seems to have favoured David Luiz. What do you make of that right-sided centre-back position, sort of the debate between those two players?
Yeah, I really like Rob Holding. I think that basically, if you sort of kind of break down Arsenal's best players this season, I think the Holding's in the conversation, isn't he? Is sort of one of the sort of best three. You know, I'd probably go for Saka and Smith Rowe in there as well a little bit. But I just I think Holding is a really good player, and he's so solid and so good up until obviously that concussion. And for whatever reason, since then, he's just not. He was one of the first names on the team sheet, and I do think that's it is a valid point. I think that it'd be interesting to see what happens with David Luiz. I think they'll give him another contract, and then basically then that'll be. I think he'll get another contract, and then there's still so much competition in the centre half areas, and while you were playing with a back three, it's easier to manage, but then basically when you're playing a back four, I think it's going to be that much more difficult. I think the sort of kind of Callum Chambers comes into the conversation as well. Maybe that'll be as backup right back, because. I feel as if Hector Bellerin will probably leave in the summer, and then basically they'll go with Cedric Suarez, and then sort of Chambers right back up. So there's options there. I'm a big Holding fan. I agree with that point. I do think Arsenal are better and more solid. And again, talking about characters, I think he's a big character.
I think we'd be remiss when we're talking about that right-sided centre-back spot also not to remember William Saliba. He's going to come back to the own in the summer. I think maybe you say. You think David Luiz will get a contract? My personal thinking is that I don't think Arsenal will offer him that extension, just purely because of the fact that he'll be 34 come the end of the season, David Luiz, and I think he comes in for a lot of stick, but I think he has actually done quite a good job for Arsenal over the past couple of seasons. People wheel out the red card stats and the penalty stats, and fair enough, those are true and those are things you can hit him with. But Arsenal have a very young team, and you look at Gabriel alongside him. He's a player who is a great defender, but he does tend to get a bit shaky when he's under pressure in those big moments. And I think having a leader alongside him, like a David Luiz or even like a Rob Holding, is necessary. But I look at Saliba and I look at how well he's doing in France. I look at how much Arsenal have invested in him, which is a lot of money. I think if they do end up sending him out on loan again come the start of next season, then for me, that seems like Arteta doesn't really view him in his long-term plans. But I mean, that's just pure speculation on my part. I'm not 100% sure, but we can talk about Saliba and we can talk about another young player. And there's a question coming in from Paul Davis, who says, what on earth is going on with Martinelli? And Gabriel Martinelli wasn't even involved in the squad yesterday. Why do you think that is?
As soon as you say Paul Davis, I think of Arsenal legends and some pride. But it's a good point he makes, in that basically, I agree with him wholeheartedly. It's slightly mystifying. Arteta, I think, he sets such high standards that basically it makes you suddenly think, well, is it an issue about kind of levels in training? Is it an issue about sort of kind of mentality or focus, or he's had so many injury problems, has that infected his confidence? The answer is I'm not absolutely sure, if I'm brutally honest, but I just think that he's such an exciting player, isn't he? And he can make I also think that Arsenal clearly have so many options that basically it's difficult to make a case for him starting. But the one aspect is that basically where he makes a case to start is as an impact substitute, and he can make that impact substitute. If you remember around December time, when Martinelli got back in the side, he was making such a difference, and he gave the team such an energy that I just thought it was great. It was great to see, and so it's kind of really frustrating, because I do genuinely believe that this is a special talent. Yeah, and there's something not quite right there, and you do wonder whether it's slightly a fitness issue. And it'll be interesting to see kind of when he comes back in, because it surely can't be long, because I do think he's such a special player.
It's that thing, isn't it, that makes the Willian signing seem even more curious. Willian's a guy who comes in for a lot of sticks. I've no intention of piling any more on top of him right here. But I think
his stats last week were amazing, by the way, weren't they? About the assists,
they were very good. 4 assists in 4 games, not bad.
Yeah.
But I feel that when it comes to Arsenal's young players, you look at Reece Nelson in the under-23s, can't get a game can't even get on the bench in the senior team. Martinelli can't even get on the bench. I do question. I get why Arteta brought in Willian. I get why he felt he needed a bit more experience going forward, especially with Pepe's sort of unreliability in the first season. He started to find a bit more consistency now, Pepe. But I think I wonder about the wisdom of that, and especially given that Willian's going to be around for another 2 seasons after this. I think if it was a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, maybe fair enough. But players like Martinelli have seen their minutes docked, while players like Willian are being given opportunities. And I know that's something Arsenal fans, especially on social media, aren't particularly happy about. And Willian, he's putting up the numbers, he's getting assists, but he's not. I don't think he's a long-term solution in the way that Martinelli is. And maybe come the summer, we'll see Martinelli starting to be used as a number 9. I think that's a really interesting proposition, because Alex Lacazette looks as though, despite how he continues to perform in big games, looks as though he's going to be on his way. So maybe we'll see him used as a striker then. That could be interesting. But I think it's a really unfortunate situation, re Gabriel Martinelli, and maybe he'll go out on loan next season. Maybe he'll be in and around the first team. I'm not really sure what the best thing to do with him is, other than try and give him minutes where possible. But Arsenal's games are all so important now. There's no FA Cup games where you could sort of throw him in for 45 minutes or 60 minutes. The Europa League is massive. The Premier League is massive. So I just can't see where Martinelli's next minutes are going to come from. But we'll finish off with one final question here from Biplop, who says that do you think Smith Rowe's progress will be hindered if Arsenal end up signing Martin Odegaard permanently? Now, there's obviously lots of rumours that Arsenal do want to sign Odegaard permanently. Do you think that would be a bad thing for Smith Rowe's development?
It's really difficult, isn't it? I do think ultimately, I do think it's such a dilemma. But you can't carry on thinking, I just need one player for each position, and you've got to have competition as well. But I do think that Smith Rowe has been such a breath of fresh air, and he's made such positive impact for me, that I do feel a little bit sad for him, that basically all of a sudden he's got Odegaard in front of him. And I think sometimes, Odegaard, please don't get me wrong, I think he's a good player, and I thought I actually ended up making him my man of the match yesterday. I think he made a sort of positive impact. I was torn between sort of him, Smith Rowe, and Tierney, and so I've been a bit divided, and I think probably a lot of Arsenal fans have too as well, about sort of Odegaard. I think there's this kind of assumption, isn't there? Sometimes you don't sort of kind of follow the club sort of as closely as we perhaps do, in that basically I think I think the sort of the wider media might say Odegaard's a really good signing. He's done this. He scored that amazing goal, and the reality is that a lot of Arsenal fans who sort of love to see young players, love sort of kind of enjoying the young players breaking through, which I think is great, by the way. It's always what I've fed off as a football fan. To see young players come through. I think there's nothing better. Particularly when they're homegrown talent. And I just think it's been a bit, it has impinged upon him. It's impinged upon his minutes and opportunities. I think Smith Rowe is best in the middle. But do they need that extra bit of quality, that playmaking option that they've lost perhaps since, Ozil's decline and then departure? Well, yes, absolutely. But I just think it's a shame if you're kind of squeezing out, Smith Rowe, making him less effective in a wide role, because I don't think he is a wide player. I just think he is that sort of playmaker. I could see why they'd want to do Odegaard, but it would come with a kind of big caveat, wouldn't it? That kind of, what does it mean for Smith Rowe? But there's injuries, there's opportunities, and I guess play so many games. But I just feel a little bit concerned, for Smith Rowe if that was the case. Because I tell you what, I think Smith Rowe and Saka, their understanding, their combinations. For me, that was when Arsenal were at their best post-Christmas, when they played some lovely combinations, and I just love to see that. And I'll hold my hands up and say that basically I'm more, in the Smith Rowe camp than I'm in the Odegaard camp at the moment, despite how well he played against Spurs, I thought.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I like Odegaard. I think he would be a really shrewd signing, just based on
Mm,
your first point there, is that you can't just have one player for each position. I think it's vital that, especially with Smith Rowe's injury record, because he missed the first
mm,
2 months of the season with injury. He missed the whole year of his career when he sort of first broke into the Arsenal team under Unai Emery with a hip problem that sort of ended up making him not play at all when he was on loan at RB Leipzig. So maybe I think just based on that, it does make sense for Arsenal to bring in someone. And if it's someone like Odegaard, who come the end of the season will know the club, will know the squad, will know the management, all that kind of stuff. For me, that deal makes sense if it's affordable, which is all obviously dependent on where Arsenal finish in the season, which is something for us to look forward to going forward. But John, thank you very much for joining me on the Football Digest Extra, and thank you all very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you all very soon.